Hello everyone. Now, one of my favourite plants has always been Saxifraga cochlearis. It's such a neat little thing, sort of blue, grey, green, silvery leaves, lime encrusted. In early summer it throws out these plumes of white flowers. It's a great doer. It's happy in the open ground. It loves a bit of tufa. It's just a really great little alpine. I remember the first one I got from Slacktop Alpines, and it came in a cardboard box. It was all wrapped up, and I, took it out, and it was like this little silver gift inside, and I popped it straight in my my Saxifraga trough. Of course, then I wanted to go and see it in the wild, so I consulted Bacon, who told me how to go to the Maritimes. He also told me that my trip would be much enhanced with a copy of Farrer's Among the Hills, which of course it was. Now, Farrer goes on a great length about the silver Saxifragas in the area, Saxifraga cochlearis and Saxifraga callosa, which then I believe was called ligulata. Now, he talks about two very different forms of this species. One, he says, grows only around St Martin Vesuvius, and he calls that lantoscana, and the other one he says only grows around Tond, and he calls that Bellardi. Now, he lists the various different features, the leaves, the flowers, the habit, where they like to grow, whether they're in shade or not. But it's all very, very confusing. I don't think a lot of people agreed with him. What we really need is the help of an expert, and fortunately, I know just the chap. Okay, so we're off to Waterperry Gardens today to see Adrian Young. Now, not only is Adrian an expert in growing Saxifraga, but he also has an in-depth knowledge of Saxifraga species in the wild, so he's the perfect person to talk to about this. He's already written a great article for the AGS on the subject of Saxifraga callosa particularly, so yeah, he's the guy. Hopefully he'll show us around his collection as well. Hello, Adrian.
Hello, Ollie.
How's it going?
It's going fine.
Good.
Pleased to welcome you to Saxifraga heaven.
Thanks. Well, let's talk about all things Saxifraga.
Why not? Why not? Why not? Yeah, nothing better to talk about.
Quite. So this is what Farrer was calling callosa lantoscana, and this is the one he was calling Bellardi.
Correct.
But it's not quite as simple as that, is it?
It's not simple at all, no. Farrer was very interested in callosa. He wrote a lot about it. He studied the plants, and he ended up more confused than when he started. Nowadays, we realise that all these names that were given to forms of callosa are not necessary at all. Basically, nowadays it's accepted there are two vars of callosa, Australis and var callosa, and one strange one that grows at Tond, which hasn't been botanically. It should be separated off because it is different. It has a different leaf structure. The flowers are pretty much the same, but there's no other callosa that's got the long, narrow leaves that very often end up like a sort of bad hairdo. And this has been discussed at length, but it's still an open question. What are we going to do about the Tond plant? This is a typical Tond plant. I've seen it in the wild, and some have much longer leaves than that. It doesn't only grow at Tond, it does spread out a little bit, but the centre of its location is Tond.
So Farrer was wrong in that respect. That's not the only area. So one of the interesting things is his distinction between Bellardi and lantoscana. He describes one, as you said, as being around Tond, and the other one being towards St Martin Vesuvius.
Yeah.
But actually, lantoscana's not really a callosa at all, is it?
No. The lantoscana that Farrer was talking about, he collected actually at Lantosc, and he said there's something funny about it. Not a technical term, but he knew it wasn't straight callosa. And in the last 20 or 30 years, this lantoscana plant has been looked at, analysed, DNA tested, and we now know that it's a hybrid between callosa and cochlearis, which both grow around that area. It hasn't really been discovered in any other areas, just around the Lantosc area. Not quite sure why, because they grow together in other places. And that I actually published a few years ago as cross lantoscana. it seemed appropriate to keep the name lantoscana because it was never actually published properly by anybody. So lantoscana is actually a hybrid, and there's a plant here of lantoscana. Because it's a hybrid, you get variation between callosa and cochlearis. There are a few differences that you can point to. Lantoscana normally has less petals on each pedicel. With callosa, you might get 5 or 6 flowers on each pedicel, but you'll get less than that on the hybrid and also on straight cochlearis. This is Saxifraga cross Farreri. In fact, that's not a correct name. It was never published, and it's a man-made hybrid. But it's probably the first cross lantoscana hybrid that was brought into cultivation, and it's generally sold just as cross Farreri. But that name was never published. And if you come back in a couple of weeks, that will have like 100 flowers. Stems, nice, very nice plant, cross Farreri, and it's seeded into the wood.
So what's this little beauty here?
This little beauty is Saxifraga cross lantoscana, the natural hybrid between Sax callosa and Saxifraga cochlearis. This arose a few years ago. There was cochlearis growing there and callosa growing here, and this arose in the middle, and you could see quite clearly that it was a hybrid between the two.
So this has occurred in a domestic setting, as it would occur in the wild, the cross between the two species.
Yeah.
Well, this one's a really lovely form.
Yeah.
It's really compact.
Yeah. The interesting thing is you don't get the hybrid vigour. A lot of plants, when you hybridise them, get bigger, fatter and distorted quite often. But with most Saxifraga hybrids, they retain their compactness, which is what most people like about Saxifragas. They're compact plants, but they're not overgrown hybrid types.
Have you named this one, or are you going to still stick with lantoscana?
I haven't named this one. I mean, you might be able to persuade me, but I'd need to propagate it first.
I was going to say, is this plant for sale? That's what we all want to know.
This plant is not for sale, no, but it soon could be.
Yeah, it's a beauty, isn't it?
I'd have to wait. We propagate our saxifrages mainly in the winter, because in the winter the roots grow. In the summer the rosettes grow, and the roots don't grow much in the summer. So we wait to the winter and propagate right through from October through till March. That was something that Joe Elliott taught me a long time ago. So yeah, it would be worth naming and propagating. I will do that for you.
Excellent. Okay, so this is the straight species callosa.
It certainly is. It was actually a seedling into the tufa in a bed where there were lots of callosas. One of the main characteristics, one of the definitions of callosa is it has glabrous flower stems.
Yeah.
So the flower stems are smooth, no hairs. If you see one that's got lots of hairs, you need to question it. Having said that,
yeah,
Tim Roberts found populations of straight callosa that had cilia on the stem. So that's another complication.
That is a complication.
The original botanical description says glabrous flower stems, no cilia. But whether the ones that have got cilia on the stem are hybrids or stabilised hybrids from way back, we don't know. It might just be that different clones of callosa have cilia to the other ones that don't have cilia.
So it's a fairly variable species.
It's got variation that would, if you're if you were a taxonomist, you'd worry about.
You'd be splitting.
You'd be splitting. All this is what they did in the past. They had all these names for callosa. When I think basically there's just the two varieties and the odd one from Tons, and then all the rest is just variation within those two. That's what we think.
Yeah. So do you think we need to name this Tons one? I think it should be called Youngie.
So do I. What a good name. This plant here is a Sax callosa, collected in the Abruzzi by Yuri Novak a few years ago, and it's quite different. It's smaller, compact, tighter cushions, and it's been given the cultivar name of Callosa Grand Star. But genetically, it's still just callosa. It just goes to illustrate the variation you can get within one species.
So this one here is Cochlearis.
This is Cochlearis, the species Cochlearis, but it's a selection from the wild that was discovered by Manfred Rothmeier in Germany, who was a great grower of silver saxifrages and very knowledgeable on them. And this one had particularly red stems. I mean, a lot of Cochlearis will have red stems one year and green stems the next year.
Really?
But yeah, but
wow.
But this one is consistently with red stems, and he's called it Rosenrot.
Rosenrot.
Not a very romantic name, but that's what he's called it. This is a special form of Saxifraga cochlearis, introduced by Rick Lambert many years ago. It's been on this piece of tufa since 1980, so it's old like me, but it's growing and growing and getting bigger every year. Every other year it has about 200 flower stems. It's absolutely superb. So we've named it Saxifraga cochlearis Profusion. A beautiful plant from Rick Lambert.
So this is a special plant?
This is a very special plant. This is the plant that Farrer found in the Maritime Alps, and he gave it the name of Probinii, which caused outrage because Coravon, who was I wouldn't say a friend of Farrer's, but they did work together on some expeditions. But Farrer called this Probinii, and Coravon said, "It's just Cochlearis. We don't need another name." But Farrer said, "No, it's not just another Cochlearis, but I think it's an improvement on Cochlearis. It's got tighter rosettes, it's very slow going, compact. A lot of the Cochlearis that grow, particularly around the Kairos Valley and the Roya Valley, are quite big things, much bigger rosettes than this.
Yeah.
This always has small overlapping leaves, which are recurved. It always forms this tight cushion. This plant I've had in this trough for 25 years.
Really?
Yeah. This year it's not going to flower well because we've had a mild, wet, dull winter, and saxifrages really don't like those conditions. They much prefer frosty, cold, sunny winters, and then they'll flower well. If we don't get any decent frosts around Christmas time, they really won't flower well at all. They need the frost to initiate flowering buds. But yeah, this is Probinii. Farrer loved it, and so do I.
Yeah, it's lovely.
This plant I got from Valerie Finnis when I first came here in 1971. She'd had it for 20 or 30 years, and I can guarantee the real Cochlearis Probinii.
Did they know where Farrer collected this one from then? Which area?
It might be recorded somewhere, but I don't know exactly where. No.
Well, it's a beauty, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is beauty.
Yeah.
25 years old, you say, that one?
No, it's older than that.
Older than that?
It's been in this trough 25 years,
Oh,
but it's probably 35 years old as a plant.
that's
I had it in a
incredible.
pot first of all for years.
Incredible.
It's just a really nice plant.
Yeah, and tough as well.
Extremely
Tough as
tough.
old boots.
Cochlearis generally is tough.
Yeah.
And if you cross Cochlearis with other silver saxifrages, it transfers that toughness, that compactness to the new hybrid. So it's a really useful plant for the alpine gardener.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why more people don't grow it.
Yeah.
I had Robert Rolfe came here last year, and he gave me a really nice Cochlearis that was collected by Connie Greenfield. It's named Connie Greenfield. There's a lot of really attractive Cochlearis clones. I collected one in the Kairos Valley, which was the biggest Cochlearis I could find, a big fat Cochlearis, but the flowers are absolutely stupendous.
Really?
Beautiful flower stems. I called that one Kairos. I've since raised hybrids with, well, they're not really hybrids. I've crossed Cochlearis Kairos with other Cochlearis and got some more beautiful plants.
Yeah.
So Cochlearis is one of the plants that's worth experimenting with if you want a hybrid saxifrages. You always get good results.
Top tip. Here are two of my favourite saxifragas, Valdensis and Tombenensis.
Yeah.
And in the wild as well, they grow similar to this in a rock.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, and I'm sure everyone else wonders, how on earth do they grow in this stone like this?
They grow very easily. It's their natural habitat. It always surprises me that people don't seem to understand that high alpines, the cushion plants, things like saxifragas and drabas and androsses, they love rock. They must have rock. They grow on rock in the wild. And people often say to me, well, where do they get their food from?
Yeah.
Well, their food comes from sunlight.
Right.
Photosynthesis, that's where they get their food from. They do not get food from the rock.
Yeah.
What they get from the rock is minerals. And the minerals, they get the minerals from microorganisms at the root tips. There's various fungal and bacterial organisms which convert the rock into minerals and transfer it to the plants. The plant then feeds the microorganisms glucose. So there's this relationship between the rock, microorganisms and the saxifraga. This is not unique in the plant world. Mm-hmm. Desert plants do exactly the same thing because they're growing in basically sand and rock. So it always amuses me when people try and feed their alpines. You do not need to feed alpines. Of course, if you want to grow a big show plant, it will grow bigger and fatter if you feed it. But if you want to grow them naturally, as they grow in the mountains, you do not need to feed them. All my alpines in the beds here have never been fed, and I've got Cochlearis in the bed there that was planted in 1980,
Yeah.
and it's never been fed. That's because it gets its food from the sun.
Yeah.
So don't worry about feeding your alpines. And the other problem is if you grow them in a John Innes mix, you've got humus in the mix, which breaks down into NPK basically, and that is food. So some people manage to grow their alpines in a John Innes mix. I've never been successful. And I had a plant scientist here many years ago who advised against using any compost that had got humus in for alpines. Obviously other plants need the humus, but alpines they grow either on rock or scree with very little access to NPK, and if you give them a lot of NPK they will get fungal infections. And a lot of people say to me, I've got brown patches on my on my saxifragas, what's happening? And this normally is a fungal infection, normally Poussinia or one or two other fungal infections, and that's caused by the humus attracting the fungal infection from other plants, particularly fruit trees. So if you want to avoid fungal infections on your Saxifragas, don't get any humus in the compost. In Holland, they grow their saxifrages in a lot of mineral composts. Once again, no humus, and they don't normally feed their saxifrages either. So it's an interesting subject, and something that should be more widely known, really.
Well, you've seamlessly led me on to my next question.
Good.
Right, so no loam. Can you tell us your potting mix?
I can. It's very, very simple. It's sand, peat and grit. Some people question why I'm still using peat. The answer is simple, because I haven't found anything that works. And as far as I know, nobody else has for growing alpines. So I use a local sand, which is fairly gritty. And I've recently started using 10mm grit, because in the last few years we've had average temperatures much higher than before. Since about 2018, particularly the nighttime temperatures are higher, and this adversely affects particularly the Porphyllum saxifraga. They don't like high nighttime temperatures. They suffer because they're having to work, to breathe, to keep themselves cool, whereas normally in the mountains they might get hot temperatures during the day, but at the night it goes very cold, so they can rest and recover. We used to use 3mm grit, which worked fine, but recently the plant scientists have told me, no, you need to increase the grit size to 10mm, and that will reduce your watering. And you want to reduce your watering because after a certain level of watering, you start to increase the waterborne infections risk, which we've had before. On hot summers, you're watering every day, literally. Even though they've got some overhead shade, the high air temperature heats them up, and they really suffer, and you have to water it every day. Since we started using 10mm grit, that watering has halved at least.
Really?
Yeah. It makes
so does it help regulate the temperature then? Is that what it's doing?
Yeah. The other thing that regulates the temperature is moving away from black pots.
Yeah.
We used a lot of black 7cm pots, but now the plant scientists told us forget those. They heat up too much. Use brown or grey or green 7cm pots, and the temperature on a hot day will be 7 degrees less the temperature for the compost. And
wow.
That alone means you water less.
Yeah.
So get rid of your black pots. This is a Saxifraga hybrid that David Victor found in a nursery in the West Country many years ago, labelled as Longifolia imperialis. Unfortunately, an incorrect name. When I got it from David and started growing it, I realised what a good garden plant it was. So we published it as Saxifraga monarch, and it actually won an award of garden merit at the 2000 Silver Saxifraga trials at Wisley. So if you're looking for an easy Saxifraga for a raised bed or a rockery, Saxifraga monarch, it's a winner.
So this plant here was once called callosa subspecies Catalonica, but that's not the case, is it?
No, it's not. No, it was grown for years as a subspecies of callosa, but I decided to go to Montserrat in north-east Spain to see for myself what the real thing looks like, because the ones in cultivation just look like hybrids to me. And when I got to Montserrat, it was a real eureka moment.
Yeah.
I could see straight away it's got nothing to do with callosa. It's a distinct species. There are several botanical features that separate it, but you don't need to know those. You just look at the plant and you know it's not callosa, it's a different plant. So I brought I brought a few cuttings back and spread it around, and now nurseries like Aberconway and Potterton's now grow the real Sax Catalonica. Since I came back, it has been DNA analysed, and it's been proved it's a separate species at DNA level. So there's no doubt about it now, it is a separate species. And it's a most beautiful saxifrage.
It's a cracking thing, isn't it?
It's a really cracking plant. I have hybridised it also with other silver saxifrages, and it makes beautiful new hybrids. I've got a couple I can show you later, and I've got two that I've grown this from seed, and 90% of the seedlings come true.
Yeah.
So they're actually Catalonica, which is unusual for silver saxifrages because they're very promiscuous. they get friendly with all other silver saxifrages.
Yeah.
But Catalonica normally breeds true. However, the one or two hybrids you do get are spectacular.
Yeah.
Really beautiful things. This is a really nice, quite large form of Catalonica, collected at Montserrat by Jim Jermin. He gave me a cutting a year ago, and it's progressed nicely. I think because it's grown in the greenhouse, it hasn't got so much white on the leaf margins, but when I plant it out, that'll revert to the normal condition.
So these are your Catalonica hybrids?
This one is a special hybrid.
Yeah.
This is Saxifraga cross Rothmiriae. This was a cross made in Germany by Manfred Rothmeyer, and it's Sax callosa cross Catalonica. It's a deliberate cross he made.
Yeah.
So it's got qualities of callosa and qualities of Catalonica. The rosettes of Catalonica are always outstanding, and that's been inherited here. It's got that fine silver edge which you don't normally get on callosa. So this is one that's not on the market yet. I've only got one plant of it, but I intend to propagate it and get it distributed because it's a really outstanding silver saxifraga. The other plant is Saxifraga Catalonica Waterperry wine.
I've got to say, this one's my favourite.
Yeah.
I think this is a stunning plant.
Well, I know you like wine. It is a stunning plant, but the flowers are pure Catalonica. There's nothing different.
Yeah.
But the rosettes, they have a thick silver band around the leaf margin, which stands out. It's a big contrast between the dark green leaves. But in the winter, if we get any hard frosts, these rosettes turn red.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You don't believe me, do you? They really turn red.
It sounds like this magical, wondrous plant.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. I've propagated it and given it to a few people, but I intend to get it into the trade as soon as I can. I'd like the the well-known alpine nurseries to have this because everyone would like a plant of this. The thing about silver saxifrages is you can, with selective breeding, make beautiful rosettes, and the rosettes form a really nice tight cushion, and you have rosettes for all year. The flowers are only there for a month.
Yeah.
So in the past, people have not bred silver saxifrages for the rosettes, they've bred them for the flowers. So you get some really nice flowers, but pretty average or below average rosettes. But with selective breeding, you really can turn out some beautiful plant cushions. I mean, Saxifraga Tumbling Waters is a classic example. You've got Saxifraga callosa and Saxifraga longifolia, and when you breed them, you get the qualities of both plants, which makes sense. But a lot of people don't understand when you breed, you need to have specific aims. You don't just cross two things willy-nilly. You need to really focus on the qualities of both plants. This is something David Walkie taught me many years ago about you need to be selective on your parentage, and then you get a good chance of getting some decent hybrids.
Quite, we should bear the same thing in mind in human breeding.
We don't want to go there.
But I totally agree with you. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like Saxifraga almost make the perfect alpine plant because, like you say, fantastic flowers when they're flowering.
Yeah.
But also you get a really neat and attractive bit of foliage when they're not doing their thing.
You can do. Yeah, that's right. It's not rocket science really, but obviously you've got to be very patient.
Sure.
Because my first experiment with crossing and breeding was when I collected a very large cochlearis from the Kairos Valley. I brought it into cultivation. It was a beautiful thing, and David Walkie said, "Well, why don't you self it?" So I crossed it with itself, and I got 2 cultivars that are absolutely superb, bigger flowers.
Really?
Well, slightly bigger flowers, slightly taller flower stems, real improvements on the original plant. One I called Moon Dance, which people like Aberconway sell, and there's another one called Oh Yes. Don't ask me why I called it Oh Yes.
That's a good name, yeah.
But and they're different they're both different to each other, and the original Cochlearis cliros form. So if you're gonna cross Saxifrages, make sure you've got good parents.
Sterling advice.
Yeah. The other one that I did really well with was Tumbling Waters. If you self that, because you've got the longifolia and the longifolia and the other parent, which is callosa, if you cross those 2 together, both parents are good. You get some terrific new. None of them look like Tumbling Waters, but the first time I did it, I had 50 seedlings and 20 of them were outstanding plants.
Yeah.
So because you've got 2 good parents, you get a lot of children.
Well, Adrian, thanks so much for having us. Thanks for showing us around. Thanks for all the information. Fantastic stuff. You're also having an open day on the 24th of May. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Every year we have a summer sax day, usually in May. We time it so the silver saxifrages will be in full flower. We spend a lot of time organising, getting the right sort of people coming. We've got several people coming that will be having plants for sale. So it's, generally speaking, a really happy day. Normally the weather's good, can't guarantee that. But yeah, anyone's welcome to come and see the rock diamonds, as we call them, the silver saxifrages.
Well, I'm looking forward to it immensely. I'll be here.
We'd be pleased to see you anytime, Ollie.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Adrian.
Pleasure.
Right, Adrian, one thing I forgot to ask you. What is your top growing tip?
Well, a couple of tips come to mind. In 1971, Valerie Finnis said to me, "Adrian, do not believe what you read in books. And secondly, if you want to grow saxifrages, well, go to the mountains."
Perfect.